Welcome to the first iteration of Nykatt Reviews, the show where I review whatever games I feel like. For this iteration, I have completed 9 Souls, a Metroidvania Souls-like, so think Metroid, Castlevania, and Dark Souls. But really, this game is like Hollow Knight meets Sekiro. It's a side-scroller platformer Souls-like, like Hollow Knight, with a focus on parries, like Sekiro. Also, another very important detail about this game. This game is about cats. Well, cat people, so not quite as interesting. But still, I will happily play any game with cats or cat-like people in it. One thing I'd like to mention before going any further is, I'm a person who likes numbers, rankings, and assigning values to things. So with this video, and my other reviews, I will be giving scores to the story, gameplay, visuals, sound direction, and an X factor, which is either something that got me to play the game, or something that kept me playing the game, or is something that is intrinsic to that game specifically. Then at the end of the video, I will average the scores together and give a final score. This game is a revenge story, where our main character Yi was killed by his master, but thanks to the primordial roots, after 500 years he's back in action to take his revenge. He is joined by Xuan, an orphaned 8-man boy, which interestingly, despite this being a game about cat people, there are humans in it, which the cat people use as livestock. I feel like there's a joke here about real-life cats, but I'm sure you know what I'm getting at. Anyways, Xuan is a naive but curious boy who Yi lived with for a while and is going to be the next sacrifice, but is saved by Yi before Yi enters an elevator back into his world. Xuan ends up following him and is an integral part for getting the true ending of the game. If you want to see that, don't be me, and actually finish every piece of side content. I tried, but I must have done something wrong because I still don't know how I didn't get the true ending. I will say though, I did immediately after finishing the game go onto YouTube and watch a video on the true ending, so at least I know what that is. You'll end up meeting other important characters, and sorry if I'm butchering their names, like Yi's best friend, Kwafu, a craftsman engineer who helps build weapons and gear for Yi, which, if you have been paying attention, is still around after 500 years. The reason why eventually gets revealed as you play the game. Then there's Shenong, another 8-man, who has a penchant for exploring, conspiracies, and eating poison. Abacus, Yi's AI assistant, Chio, a genetically modified weapon who decides he'd rather be a scholar and sells you equipment, and others. All of these characters will play a role in enacting Yi's revenge. I'd tell you more about all of them, but most information about every character turns into massive spoilers. I could even say telling you about some of Yi's allies is slightly spoiling the game. But, oh well. At the start, Yi is not what I would call a good person. He's hell-bent on getting revenge and doesn't care what happens to anyone who gets in his way. But as you go through the story, he gets more attached to his allies and starts to soften up a bit. By the end, he doesn't even want to kill all the enemies he has to fight. You also get a good amount of backstory for the main characters as you do side content that gives good insight on all of the characters' motives and attitudes. The story, however, is based on Taoist beliefs, which for me personally as a Westerner, I didn't really resonate with, so unfortunately that does factor in a bit for my score of the story. I also have to mention that often the story is told through the characters talking to each other or found in hidden logs around the world, and you'll often have to travel back to your home base to talk to characters to complete side content that will be needed for the true ending of the game. This can eat up a lot of your time if you aren't invested in the story. That said, overall I was invested in the story, and was excited to learn about them in the world. For the story, I will give this game a 7 out of 10. Being a Souls-like, this game is hard. Like at times really hard. There were certain bosses, mini-bosses, or even sometimes generic enemies that would make me want to pull my hair out dealing with them. Especially if you die to them while you have a ton of money, and now you have to safely make your way back to them and beat them to get your money back. If you die before then, you do not get your money back. But if you played a Souls-like before, that isn't news to you. There was one time where I accidentally walked into a boss room with a large amount of money on me, and I couldn't safely get the money and get out, so I had to run in, pick it up over and over again as I kept dying trying to learn its patterns. But how does it play though? Overall, it's pretty simple. You have your standard platforming, a basic strike attack, dodge rolls that I found got more and more useless outside of platforming as the game went on, parries, your bow, your talisman, and hacking. While you do get new abilities throughout the game, they are mostly just upgraded variants of existing moves. For example, your parry. It can only block basic attacks and projectiles, but eventually you'll get an air parry that'll beat green outlined unblockable attacks. Then you'll get a charge parry that'll let you beat red unblockable attacks. Also, something I found fascinating is the last new ability you get is double jumping, which would usually be one of the first upgrades you get in this genre of games. What an interesting design choice. Combat in this game is pretty straightforward. For the most part, just parry and dodge enemies' attacks while you wait for an opportunity to deal damage back. Attacking is simple. You have basic strikes and your talisman. The bow is completely optional. As you parry attacks, you build up chi charges for your talisman, which you can then use on enemies and detonate them for massive damage. Once you get used to how combat works in this game, despite how simple it is, it's very fluid and satisfying. Not every boss I found incredibly fun, but I wouldn't say any of them were terrible, or even bad in fact. Most were good, or very good, except for this one mini-boss that I found in a room with 2 turrets shooting you, and while it was a very simple enemy, with very telegraphed attacks, I found trying to find windows to hit it while avoiding turret shots or reflect the shots back at the turrets was infuriating. But a couple of the boss fights were what I would call masterpieces. These fights give you fair but difficult attacks to deal with and build up the mechanics through multiple phases, giving you a chance to learn them in the easier phase, but ramping up as the fights go on. These fights I truly felt like I could enter a flow state and feel like a master swordsman dueling with a powerful enemy. One of these fights I'd even say was my favorite boss fight of all time. Just thinking about this fight makes me excited to try it again. I'll have to do another video on that fight specifically in the future. There is also a focus on exploration. This game has multiple rooms that you need to go through and oftentimes clear an objective to advance the story. They also have secret items and areas to discover through exploration and puzzles. Most puzzles are simple, but there were a couple I actually needed help to figure out. I wouldn't say they were extremely difficult, but sometimes the clues weren't as obvious as I would have liked. All of this, and I haven't touched on the jade system and the skill tree at all. To put it simply, you can find or buy different jades that you can slot in and make big playstyle changes anytime you head to a checkpoint. If you played Hollow Knight, this is the charm system. Literally the same thing. But I guess if something isn't broken, there's no need to fix it. The skill tree lets you upgrade your skills and gain new sub-abilities to go along with them. As you defeat enemies or find Tao fruit in the world, you will earn skill points to buy the upgrades on the skill tree. Eventually you'll be able to get all the upgrades so long as you play long enough, so don't worry too hard about what to pick and just pick what you want. The skill tree to me, however, was kind of boring. There were some big playstyle changes you could make through it, but it mostly felt like minor upgrades. The Jade system, however, had a ton of customization in it, and could drastically change how you play, which to me was a lot more interesting. To sum gameplay up, combat I found potentially too simple, since the range of attacks you could do was very limited, but it more than makes up for it with the in-depth parry mechanics that allow devs to put in some fun and interesting reaction tests into the game. Exploration was good too. Finding all the secrets in every zone was fun, and honestly, I don't generally feel like doing that in most games, but I was interested in doing that even before I found out about the true ending requirements. That once again, I'm still kinda mad I didn't get. The puzzles were also pretty good, but I feel like they could have done a better job at making some of the hints a little more obvious. All in all, for gameplay, I give this game an 8 out of 10. This game has a beautiful art style that does a good job at painting a vibrant world filled with interesting characters. At the same time though, this game uses its art style to show some incredibly gross and gory images. It's a fascinating gap between how beautiful they made some parts of the game and how haunting they made other parts. The theming of the rooms wonderfully sets the whole vibe of each area. The character designs are great too. Yi is both a cute little cat guy while still looking like a competent swordsman, but also very visibly mentally off. His eyes and demeanor show how shut off from others he is emotionally at first, and he softens as the game goes on. All the character designs do a great job at showing off who the character is from the moment you meet them. The animations do a good job at making combat feel fluid. I personally didn't see any issues with the animations, Nothing felt off or janky. To me, the game was near flawless art-wise. The only big thing for me was the art style wasn't necessarily my favorite, but that's completely subjective. What I can say though is I thought the game was visually fantastic. This begs the question though, if I thought it was pretty much flawless art-wise, but it wasn't my favorite art style, does that mean I should give it a 10? I think yes. The music is a surprisingly cohesive blend of traditional Chinese music, choral music, and EDM. It can swap between being beautiful, ethereal, haunting, tense, and frantic depending on the room or the scene. I think the only thing in this game better than the art design is its OST. They completely knocked it out of the park with the OST, and I couldn't say any one song was bad. They all fit the scene they were part of perfectly, and a lot of them were just straight up good tracks. My favorite track being The Lone Soul, a powerful but beautiful and somber track. The combination of the art and music creates an incredibly immersive experience that makes you just want to be in the world regardless of the gameplay, which again is still very good. The only thing I can fault the music for is that many of the individual tracks are not quite as memorable as some other games. As for other sounds in the game, I think they are all solid and do a good job at conveying actions being done. I especially love the parry sounds. There are different sounds for imperfect parries and perfect parries, and the perfect parry sound lives rent-free in my head now. Without this sound, the parries wouldn't feel nearly as satisfying. So as I kind of already mentioned, 10 out of 10 sound design. Finally, the X Factor. I could talk about the characters, the addictiveness of Souls-likes, the atmosphere, but the thing about this game that I think about most is that this game is a cat game. If you haven't figured out from my name or the fact that I referenced it at the start of the video, I love cats. Half the reason I gave this game a shot was because it was a game about cats. Or cat people in this case. Some of the designs really give me that cat feeling, others not so much. Honestly, I was kinda disappointed when the cat aesthetic didn't end up being too important to the story of the game. It only really came up in one piece of hidden content, which was maybe the most exciting part of the game for me, and I'm only kind of kidding about that. As a cat game, it honestly comes up a bit short. But still, I overall appreciate the aesthetic of the characters if nothing else. Though, the way they treat each other and the ape-man does scream cat behavior. I do wish it was more cat-like though. But to me, it was enough for a 6 out of 10. Averaging the scores out comes to a solid 8.2 out of 10, which I completely agree with. It's a very good game, phenomenal atmosphere, an interesting story, though there were parts, especially the ending, I did wish went differently. It has strong gameplay, though your attack patterns don't really get too complicated, which I do wish was more detailed. Still though, the parry system was phenomenal. Finally, it just wasn't quite as catty as I wanted it to be. If you're going to use the cat aesthetic, I really want the cat features played up more than they were. Regardless, it was an enjoyable experience from start to finish. Now, if you're still not sure whether you should play it or not, here's a guide. If you like Souls-likes or Metroidvanias, this is worth a shot. If you're specifically a fan of Hollow Knight, please do play this game. It should be right up your alley. If you're into challenging games, or are a masochist, definitely do play this game. If you're into Taoist culture in any way, you'll enjoy the aesthetic and story. If you're into visually or musically stunning games, this game is worth it. For anyone else, you can always try it and return it if you don't like it. But that's going to do it for this video. Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, throw it a like, comment if you have something to say, and subscribe if you want to see more from me. And I'll see you in the next one.